Need some new Commander cards? Well, you can pre-order Commander Legends now from our amazing sponsor, Card Kingdom. Just head on over to cardkingdom.com. Hello, everyone. It's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Commander Legends spoilers, and we got some sweet cards to talk about today, including our second Planeswalker. 2 out of 2. There's only 2 in the set. We got our second one today, which means we should probably jump right into it. Start talking about sweet new Commander Legends cards. So first up today, we have Jeska Thrice Reborn, the second Planeswalker from the set. So 3 mana, legendary, legal as your commander partner Planeswalker. 0 loyalty, but it enters the battlefield with a loyalty counter for each time you've cast a commander from your command zone this game. So because it's a partner, you get 2 commanders to work with, but really, like, let's say you just cast Jeska on turn 3, it's going to have 1 loyalty. So what are the abilities of Jeska? 0, choose a creature until the next turn. If that creature would deal combat damage to one of your opponents, it deals triple that damage instead, and then -X deals X damage to up to 3 targets. So, Jeska is essentially like a one-shot Fire Emancipation combined with kind of a weird Jaya's Emulating Inferno. That's the only target X damage spells I could find. So the downside of Jeska is it doesn't really have much loyalty to start. Like, let's say you cast Jeska, first time it's 1 loyalty. The second time it's 2 loyalty. The next time it's 3 loyalty. That's just not that much loyalty. I guess if you have your partners and the game goes long, eventually you could have a lot of loyalty. But really, it just doesn't have that much loyalty, which means the -X, unless you do some shenanigans with it, which we'll talk about in a minute, probably isn't going to be all that powerful. Like, you're sniping, a Birds of Paradise for a 3-mana Planeswalker? That's not that great. I do love the synergy between Jeska and Tevishet. So I think the best use of Jeska, at least one of them, is not to actually really care about what it does as much as sacrificing it for value. Because Tevishet, remember, if you can sacrifice a Planeswalker commander, you get to draw 3 cards. So I imagine just Jeska and then Tevishet sack it to draw 3. Then you can cast Jeska again, which gets it more loyalty. Then you can sacrifice it again, maybe after zeroing to draw 3 more. So it is a sweet Planeswalker partner duo kind of card draw engine if you play them both as your commander. The other thing I think that's interesting about Jeska, as far as partner combinations, is the 0 ability can be very aggressive. Let's say you have like Bruce Tarl, which can give something double strike and lifelink. Double strike is really powerful, but double strike with triple damage is absolutely absurd. That means Bruce Tarl is technically like hitting for 6 by itself, but then that's tripled up to 18 with a little bit of help, a little bit of pumping, maybe some equipment. You can easily turn that into a one-shot combination. Same with Akiri. Akiri gets really big if you get a bunch of artifacts, so Jeska giving it triple damage can potentially let you one-shot it. So maybe some Voltron-y partner pairs could work with Jeska as well. The downside is it can't really gain loyalty, which makes it kind of like the new War of the Spark Planeswalkers, a little bit like Sarkhan the Mad, where Jeska is basically coming down and dying and then recasting. Yes, it's more powerful when you recast it, but Planeswalkers that can't add loyalty, they're a little bit risky. You can try to build around that in like Contagion Engine or Doubling Season or Oath of Gideon to add extra loyalty, but really, Jeska's going to come in and die. It's more like a spell than a Planeswalker most of the time. I can't imagine Jeska is going to sit on the battlefield for long. It's going to come down, do its thing, die, maybe you sacrifice it for value, and then cast it again in the future. The one thing that is worth pointing out about Jeska is it is a I win the game infinite mana payoff. So if you can make infinite red mana, let's say with Deadeye Navigator or Peregrine Drake, or Savala with Free from the Rear, or Grand Architect Pilla, choose your favorite infinite mana combo, but it's got to be red. You just take in, cast Jeska, ping someone with the -X. Jeska dies, then since you have infinite mana, you cast it again. This time it's going to have more loyalty, meaning a bigger ping. Jeska's going to die again, then with infinite mana, cast it again. So essentially, you deal infinite damage to the entire table from your command zone if you can make infinite mana with Jeska out. So that's the other interesting kind of spiky aspect. I mean, if you got infinite mana, you'd probably figure out a way to win anyway, but having a way to win with infinite mana in your command zone is powerful. So Jeska, I feel like it's not that powerful of a Planeswalker in all honesty. It's sweet that it's an infinite mana payoff. It does have some cool synergies with sacrifice effects since you want to keep recasting it to make it more powerful, maybe in one-shot Voltron partner decks, but really the lack of loyalty makes me a little skeptical that Jeska is going to be all that good, but in specific decks, I think it can be pretty powerful. We also got Jeska's signature spell, Jeska's Will, and I think this might be the best of the signature spells we've seen, or the Will cycle. So 3 mana, choose 1. If you control commander, you get to choose both. Add a red mana for each card to target opponent's hand, or exile the top 3 cards of your library, and you can play one of them this turn. So Jeska's Will, it's essentially literally act on impulse. 3 mana, exile your top 3, you can play them this turn. But it can also be like a Seething Song, maybe an Iron Crag Feat. Like when you think about Commander, usually someone has 7 cards in hand. People like to have a full hand in Commander, maybe more than 7 cards with like Reliquary Tower or something. So there's a pretty decent chance this is going to be 3 mana to add 7 mana a lot of times, which is a pretty powerful ritual, and maybe some card draw as well, even though act on impulse. It's not a good card draw spell. It is played in 0% of decks according to EDH Rec, so I don't think you're excited about having an act impulse in your deck, but the flexibility of being a good ritual combined with a bad card draw spell is nice. I think the most obvious home for Jeska's Will is some sort of Storm style deck. Both of the abilities work really well with Storm. Like maybe you're playing Mizzix or Melik or Niv Mizzet, a deck that's trying to cast a bunch of spells and Storm off. Jeska's Will does exactly what you want. It gives you more mana to keep casting more spells to up your Storm count, and it gives you card draw, so it's giving you spells to cast with that mana, which I think is a pretty potent combination in a Storm style deck. The other thing that I think is really cool about Jeska's Will is symmetrical card draw effects. There's cards like Prosperity, Fascination, that for not that much mana, usually blue or double blue and X, make each player draw X cards. So Jeska's Will can kind of make these free. Like let's say you have, I don't know, 10 mana. You can cast Prosperity for 6 mana, draw 5 cards. All your opponents are also going to be +5 cards, and then Jeska's Will is essentially going to net you back all the mana that you dump into Prosperity because your opponent's going to have more cards in hand, and then you can keep casting more spells, so that's another sweet synergy to keep in mind. So Jeska's Will, while I don't think I'd play this in just any deck, in a Storm-style deck, or decks that are built around the effect, I think it's actually really good. It is a solid combination of a ritual with card draw, which is perfect for Storm, and probably some other decks as well. Speaking of red cards, we got a red uncommon commander in Drago the Shipwreck. So 7 mana, 7/5 legendary giant pirate trampling partner, and it's an additional cost to cast it. You can sacrifice any number of artifacts or creatures. It costs 2 less for each permanent sacrifice that way, and 2 less for each other artifact or creature you've sacrificed this turn. So even if you just sacrifice other stuff, you can make it really cheap. So even though it's 7 mana, it's often going to cost much, much less than that. So Drago is essentially like I got Eternal Bantu, Shimatsu the Blood Cloaked, other mass sacrifice commanders. And the thing I like about Drago is since it is a partner, you can actually play multiple colors. Like there's some cool God Eternal Bantu shenanigans. There's some cool Shimatsu shenanigans, but you can't combine them together because they're monocolored commanders. With Drago, throw in a black partner, let's say, like Tevishat, and all of a sudden, you could take advantage of the Grave Packs and the Blood Artists from black, and you also get access to, like, Insurrection or Mob Rule, which is hilarious. You like Insurrection, steal all your opponent's board. If that's not lethal, you just Drago, sack everything, turn it into a Plague Win on top of smashing your opponent for a bunch of damage. So the fact that you get additional colors, I think, is the biggest upside of Drago. As a monocolor card, I think it's worse than the other similar options we have available, but thanks to Partner and having extra colors, there are some really sweet things you can do in a Drago deck. Next up, we have a kind of weird white card, an Archon of Coronation. So 6 mana, 5/5 flying Archon. When it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch, and then as long as you are the Monarch, damage doesn't cause you to lose life. So this ability, it's very strange. We probably got to explain how this actually works. So the first bar is pretty simple. It's a 6-drop, 5/5 flyer, decent stats, that makes you the Monarch, which is always good because you're guaranteed to at least draw 1 card when you become the Monarch. And if you can defend it, you will be the Monarch for longer and draw even more cards. But if you read that ability, as long as you're the Monarch, damage doesn't cause you to lose life. It sounds like this protects you from being the Monarch. It keeps you with the monarchy. It keeps you from dying as long as Archon of Coronation is out, but technically that's not true. So let's say your opponent has a Colossal Dreadmaw. They attack you. It gets through. it hits you. What happens is you will not take the 6 damage because the damage isn't going to cause you to lose life. However, your opponent will steal the monarchy from you because you're still taking the damage. So your opponent is going to still get the crown, and then Archon is turned off, so the next time you're attacked, you are going to end up taking the damage. So that's kind of how this works. Also worth mentioning, like, that means commander damage is still down, even though your life total isn't going to change. If your opponent smashes you with their commander, that's still going to add up. Infect damage is still out. So it's kind of a weird way to word the ability, but the main idea is if you have Archon out, your opponent's going to attack you because they want to be the Monarch. That's how the Monarch works. Everyone wants the crown to draw the cards. But when your opponent attacks you, you're still going to lose the crown, but you're not going to lose the life. So that is the upside of Archon. As far as what you do with this, I think things that make you take damage have some potential. Like Heartless Hidetsugu, for example. If you have Archon out and you're the Monarch, when you tap Heartless Hidetsugu, each of your opponents are going to take damage equal to half of their life total, but you're not actually going to end up losing life. You take the damage, but you don't lose the life. Same with Command the Dreadhorde. You can Command the Dreadhorde for 1 billion life because you're not actually going to lose the life from the damage you take. So that's kind of one aspect of building around it. It also can be an upside in a weird way that you still take the damage, but the damage doesn't cause you to lose life. Let's say you're playing Darren, King of Keljor. You kind of want to be dealt damage because when you're dealt damage, you're going to make a bunch of your soldiers. Well, Archon does work really well with Darren. If you have Darren and Archon and you're the Monarch, you can take a huge smash from your opponent. You're going to get a token for that damage, which is sweet for the amount of damage that you're dealt, but you're not actually going to lose life for that damage. Same with stuff like Angel Heart Vial, which also triggers to get counters when you're dealt damage. You're still dealt the damage, you just don't lose the life, so there's some sweet synergies there. So Archon of Coronation, I think the card's pretty good. Like, it's got a good body. It's flickerable, which is very nice with Monarch, because you want to be the Monarch as much as possible, so decks like Drago might want access to it, and it does protect you a little bit, and maybe incentivizes your opponents to attack each other instead of you, even though you have the crown, because it's kind of sad to, like, send your whole team at someone and have them not actually lose any life as a result, so it does protect you a little bit with the crown, but I think it's a really sweet card, a very powerful card, a very good card. They can show up in essentially any white deck because the Monarchy is so good, with extra value if you're flickering or have damage, mass damage, hit everyone's synergies in your deck. We also got a couple of Monarchy courts, enchantments, an entire cycle coming in the set apparently. So the white one and the black one, Court of Grace and Court of Ambition. So Court of Grace, 4 mana, white enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. If you're the Monarch, instead you get a 4/4 angel token with flying. And then Court of Ambition enters the battlefield, become the Monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 3 life unless they discard a card. If you're the Monarch, instead each opponent loses 6 life unless they discard 2 cards. So let's start with Court of Grace. Court of Grace, some people have been rumbling about maybe showing up in Legacy. Palace Jailer is oddly like a Legacy staple. Court of Grace makes you the Monarch the same way that Palace Jailer does. It's not as immediate with its impact where you're able to exile a creature right away, but it does make a horde of blockers over the course of a few turns. That's probably going to make it hard for your opponent to steal the crown, and drawing 2 cards a turn is very, very powerful. I think the best way to think about Court of Grace is kind of like a white bitter blossom. I think that's the most straightforward way to look at it. So the downside is it's 4 mana rather than 2. The upside is you essentially ETB draw a card because you always get that first Monarchy draw, and you have the upside of making bigger creatures if you are the Monarch, and you're not going to lose life every turn like you would with Bitter Blossom, and Bitter Blossom is a pretty decent card, although it's not a card you just jam in any deck. So I think with something like Court Grace, what you're looking for is decks that care about what it does. Maybe you're a token deck, like Alea is. Court of Grace is staple in that deck. It triggers Alea, it's going to make tokens, which you want anyway. Maybe you're Tisa Orza of Scion, and you want white creatures to sacrifice for value. Court Grace, perfect there is a way to up your white creature card. Maybe you're like an angel deck, and you're going to maintain the Monarchy and start making angels. Something like Lyra. Court of Grace could be perfect there as well. So I think Court of Grace, it's a very powerful effect. I don't know if I jam it in just any white deck, but if you are a deck that is built around what it does, making tokens, caring about white creatures in specific, maybe angels or spirits, then Court of Grace is very, very good. As far as Court of Ambition, kind of reminds me of Torment of Scarabs, except instead of each opponent's upkeep, this triggering. It triggers on your upkeep for everyone. You get the upside if you're the Monarch of a mass discard. Your opponent also can't sacrifice permanents. Turbidus Scarabs, though, isn't really a heavily played card. I think Court of Ambition, you're probably looking at Mathis, maybe is a good home. Discard-based decks like Nath of the Guiltleaf, where you're actively trying to make your opponent to discard cards. Sig River Guide, kind of a cool synergy where you're draining your opponent for 3 and then you get to draw a card from it. So I think this is worse than the white one. I think it's more situational. The decks that it goes in are narrower, but if you are building around one of those things, it's going to be very solid. The other thing to mention about both of them is they're both enchantments. So if you're playing like Daxos or a Terry, something where enchantments really matter to your deck, then these cards go way, way up in value, and they do kind of work well together because one of the easiest ways to get the Monarchy back after it's stolen is just to play another Monarchy card. Like once you cast, let's say you cast a Court of Grace and you become the Monarch and you get some value off of it, but Tomer or Richard or Krim steals the crown from you. Instead of having to attack them back, Court of Ambition can come down and just make you the Monarch again, stealing it back automatically. So worth keeping in mind, especially for enchantment decks. So I think Court of Ambition, Court of Grace, they're both really good. Like when you consider that the Monarchy draws you a card the turn it comes into play, both of them are pretty fairly costed as enchantments that essentially cantrip by making you the Monarch. And if you can maintain the Monarchy, maybe you're playing Sphere of Safeties or other effects to make it so your opponent can't attack you, then these cards are crazy. When you're getting the Monarch ability of a free 4/4 every turn, or your opponent losing 6 life each turn or quickly discarding their hand, then the cards are absolutely bonkers. We also got Livio Oathsword Sentinel. So Livio, kind of an interesting legendary human knight. So 2 mana 2/2. You can pay 1 and wait to choose another target creature, and its controller may exile it with a divinity counter. So this means you can use it on your own stuff whenever you want to. You can also try to use it on your opponent's stuff, but they have a choice. So it's not removal per se. It's more for like saving your creatures, because then the second ability is pay 3, tap it, and you return each creature with a divinity counter on it from exile to the battlefield under its owner's control. It also has partner, so you can partner it up with something else. So this is essentially a way to save your creatures from your opponent being able to kill them, and you have the political aspect of being able to target your opponent's creatures, making it a little reminiscent of like Hellvault, Endless Sands, other cards that can exile creatures, store them up, and then eventually put them all back into play. So Livo, the problem is, cards like Hellvault, Endless Sands, they mostly only see play in very specific decks. You're looking at like Zillirin of the Claw, Purphoros, Sideris, Cedrus, cards where your creatures go away at the end of turn. So let's say you put a creature into play with Purphoros, it's going to get sacrificed. The trick would be you put a creature into play with Purphoros, you smash with it, and then you Hellvault it, or Endless Sands it to save it up rather than having it go into the graveyard, or maybe you unearth something with Cedrus out. Rather than having it go to exile forever, you can then Hellvault it and then put it back into play later. Livio can do the same thing, except most of the colors that care about those effects are like red and Grixis. There's not really white cards that have these abilities, which makes it a little hard to figure out where Livio fits. I do think probably the easiest synergy is Mangara of Corindor. Mangara, the way it's worded is very weird. You can tap it, and that is the cost of the ability, and the effect of the ability is you exile it and another target permanent. So the trick here is you can Mangara, target whatever you want, any permanent that you want to, and then with the trigger on the stack, you can use Livio to exile Mangara. Your opponent's thing still gets exiled, but your Mangara, it's going to go to exile with Livio, so then you can put it back into play the next turn, do it again, keep exiling things. Also a little similar to Triad of Fates. I think if you're playing Triad of Fates for some reason, Livio would be an easy inclusion in that deck. The other thing about Livio is, even though it's a knight, I don't think it's a very good knight commander. We have some really good knight commanders. Rafik of the Many, Sir Gwyn, Ariel, Quaidi, there's a whole bunch of really strong Knight commanders. So I think if you're building Knight Tribal, I would be surprised if you went with Livio. Like, there's just so much value going into 2 or 3 colors with Knights. On the other hand, if you're playing Rafik, or Sir Gwyn, or Ariel, or any other Knight commander, then I think that you're playing Livio in your 99 almost for sure. Like, being able to save your commander, your other good cards cheaply, efficiently, put it back into play, maybe save your entire board from a Wrath even, can be very, very powerful. So I think Livio It's a sweet card for the 99, especially in night decks. Maybe in some synergy decks like Mangara, but really, it's more of a 99 card than a commander card. I can't really ever imagine myself choosing this to be a commander. Maybe if there's some partner synergy I'm missing, but really, good card for 99, but not so much a sweet commander. Next on our list, we have a legendary zombie elf, Belbe Corrupted Observer. This is a card that was referenced in Magic a long time ago, back in Nemesis, I think, with Belbe's Portal. Apparently part of the story, never had its own card. So Belbe, 2 mana 2/2. In Golgari, Zombie Elf, at the beginning of each player's post-combat main phase, that player adds 2 colorless mana for each of your opponents who lost life this turn. So, in theory, in a 4-player game, if everyone loses life, then all of a sudden, you are getting to make a ridiculous amount of mana, 6 mana. So, Belbe, the easiest comparison may be Carpet of Flowers. We don't really have anything that's exactly like this, but Carpet of Flowers does something kind of similar, giving you some mana in your post-combat main phase. I think Belbe, easy inclusion in something like Yurlok, because you have the Mana Bird synergy, and we need more good Mana Bird cards to make Yurlok work. So it's an easy inclusion there. As far as actually where else it fits, it's kind of tricky. I think Jared was the first thing I thought of, since Jared can mass drain the entire table by sacrificing a creature, which is going to make sure that each of your opponents lost life. Make sure you get that 6 mana every turn. And when Belbe's making 6 mana each turn as a 2-drop, that is very strong. Could also be in like green-black elves decks like Raise the Exiled, maybe green-black zombie decks, maybe Skullbriar style zombie decks. So Belbe does have some potential homes. I think as far as building around Belbe as a commander, I think the path forward is pretty easy and simple. What you want to do is play a 1-drop like Mardu Shadowspear, Thornbow Archer, Vicious Conquistador, and attack with it on turn 2. Like, that's a combo. That's a combo. 1-drop into Belbe on turn 2. You attack with your Thornbow Archer. You drain each of your opponent for 1 life, and that's going to give you 6 extra mana on turn 2. Belbe comes down, and you get 6 extra mana, which means you can start casting really massive stuff. Like, turn 1, Mardu Shadowspear. Turn 2, Belbe. Attack with Shadowspear. You're casting a Wormcoil that turn, or the Immortal Sun, or some other big, expensive, busted, colorless thing. So, if you build around it, it can actually be very scary. Of course, the downside is if your opponent kills your Mardu Shadowspear, then your Belbe's not doing anything. You probably have expensive colorless stuff in him that you can't actually cast, but it can lead to some incredibly explosive starts if you build around it. Of course, the drawback is your opponents get to do that too. So if your opponents can hit you, they're also going to get mana, but if they're not built around it, it's unlikely on turn 2 they're going to be able to like damage everyone and make a ridiculous amount of mana. Maybe they have a 1-drop. Most likely they don't even have any at all. So you can just pull ahead really quickly if you build around it. So Belbe, I actually really like this card. This is a really interesting commander. It's a commander that, as we were just talking about, it's going to incentivize you to play cards that you wouldn't play in basically any other commander deck in history. And I love commanders like that. They get you to play different weird cards that traditionally don't show up in the format. Plus, I mean, there are some other potential homes, like the Jared deck. They could take advantage of it in the 99. But mostly, I want to build the mass trade deck with Belbe as my commander and just try to do ridiculous things on turn 2. Otherwise, today, we got a white uncommon commander in Keller's Sun Main Familiar. I don't think the card's especially good, but it is a horse, so if you want to play horse tribal, this is probably the way to go. Laboratory Servant, not technically an uncommon, but kind of feels like it. 4 mana 3 for Zombie Horror. Beginning of each end step, if you've cast a spell from your graveyard this turn or activated an ability of a card in your graveyard this turn, you get to draw a card. So this means if you're playing a deck with a bunch of Escape or Flashback or whatever, any of those graveyard type mechanics, then Laboratory Servant is potentially drawing you a card each turn, and if you can do it at instant speed, where you are casting a flashback card like Think Twice or something during your opponent's turn, it can potentially be drawing you a lot of cards, but it is worded in a safe way. It's not whenever you cast a card from your graveyard or activate an ability from your graveyard you draw a card. It's if you did it, you get to draw 1 card per turn. So if it sits out and your deck is built around it, it can be a really good source of card advantage, but it's not a legend, so it's more something that I think you just play in the 99, obviously, of a flashback deck or something along those lines. We also got a couple of sweet lower rarity reprints in Myriad Landscape, Path of Ancestry. These are lands that show up in a ton of commander decks, even though they're not silly expensive, having more of them out there will make sure they don't get silly expensive and make sure everyone has access to them, which is a good thing because you need these for a lot of different decks. We also got a couple more of the Etch foils. Ludovic and Kydel, two really sweet partner commanders from the old days of partners when they were super busted. Finally, a bunch of light lower rarity stuff. Core Cartographer is a good ram spell if you're in a mono white deck. Otherwise, mostly stuff for the limited format, I think. And that brings us to the end of our daily Commander Legends spoilers for today. So what do you think about all these sweet new cards? Which card from today are you most excited about? What do you think about Laboratory Survey? What decks could take advantage of that card advantage from the graveyard? What about Drago? Can the sacrifice partner actually be good, or is it just like a janky uncommon? Jeska, the new Planeswalker, is it better than I give it credit for in fair decks, or is it just for infinite mana combos? What about Jeska's Will? What other combos exist outside of Storm that could take advantage of it? How about Archon of Coronation? How good is the damage prevention? How good is the Monarchy? The Monarch Enchantments, Court Ambition, Court of Grace, can they show up in just any deck in their colors because the Monarchy is so good, or do you need synergies to make them work? What about Belbe? Is 6 free mana potentially on turn 2 enough to make it busted, or is it too risky that you're giving your opponent's mana? All the other stuff as well. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.